The air hit me wrong the moment I turned the key. It wasn't the smell of neglect or dust. It was sharper, faintly chemical, like something trying too hard to erase what it had done. The hallway lights were still on, the way I'd left them 2 weeks ago when I drove to Houston to sit beside my mother's hospital bed. Only now the bulbs hummed like nervous teeth, and the house listened back. I set my bag down, hearing it echo in a space that used to hum with my daughter's laughter. Leah was supposed to be upstairs. Andre said he'd be staying with her while I was gone, so she won't feel alone. He'd sounded proud of that. I almost thanked him for being decent. Almost. A faint tapping floated from somewhere below, too soft for pipes, too deliberate for wind. I froze, hand on the banister. Tap, tap. Then 3 quick slams that didn't belong in any rhythm of this house. My chest tightened. I followed the sound toward the basement door, the one Andre always claimed stuck from humidity. The doorknob trembled before I even touched it. Mama. It wasn't a word so much as a scrape of breath. For a second, I couldn't move. The bolt was latched from the outside. My hands shook as I dug through my purse for the old brass key I never needed. It didn't fit. Someone had changed the lock. I grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace and slammed it against the latch until the wood split. The smell hit first, sweat, mildew, and something sour that didn't belong to food. When the door swung open, the dark inside breathed out heat like a throat exhaling guilt. She was there, my baby, curled at the base of the stairs, hair plastered to her face, skin gray under streaks of grime. Her nails were broken, fingers blood-rimmed where she'd beaten the door. Leah, I dropped to my knees. She flinched before recognizing me, whispering something I couldn't catch. Her body trembled so hard the floorboards answered. I wrapped my coat around her shoulders and eased her head against me. It's Mama. You're safe now. The lie stuck halfway out of my mouth. The room said otherwise. A flashlight lay on its side near a folding chair and a half-empty bottle of bleach. Above it, 1 light bulb swayed, chain swinging slow, tapping metal against glass like a metronome for panic. She tried to speak again, but her lips only shaped the start of words. I pressed my ear close until I felt her breath tremble against my neck. Before she could finish, I looked up and saw the family photos on the wall shelf near the stairs. The frame of her late husband, Marcus, still stood clean and upright. Beside it, the picture of Andre, face down, glass cracked. The smallest truths never lie. I held Leah closer, hearing sirens nowhere yet, just the faint hum of the fridge pretending nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, but the house seemed to swallow sound whole. Halfway through calling 911, I realized my voice had dropped to a whisper, steady but cold. If you're hearing this part, hold your loved ones a little tighter tonight, because some kindness is just performance, and sometimes the people we trust rehearse our destruction while we're away. Drop your country flag in the comments, so I'll know where you're from. Leah stirred. Her eyes rolled open, dull but alive. Mama, her throat cracked. My husband, for his mistress, they said they want. The rest slipped out on a breath that didn't finish, and that's where the house went silent again. The sirens came before the neighbors did. Their red light spilled through the kitchen window, dancing across the cracked glass on Andre's framed photo, like it was setting him on fire. I held Leah's hand until the paramedics took over, their voices sharp and mechanical, heart rate, dehydration, possible hypothermia. None of those words sounded like her name. I stepped back and watched them work. When they asked how long she'd been down there, my mouth opened, but no sound followed. One of them found the bleach bottle, frowned, and tucked it inside an evidence bag. I caught my reflection in the stainless steel fridge door. Jaw locked, eyes steady. I looked like a woman who already knew the answers, just waiting for the lies to arrive. The front door swung open before I could ask where they were taking her. Andre stumbled in, panting like he'd run from the driveway. His shirt was half-buttoned, tie hanging like a noose he forgot to tighten. What happened? My God, what happened? His voice carried more performance than panic. He reached for me, but my body moved before my mind did. I stepped back. They found her in the cellar, I said quietly. The paramedics brushed past us, stretcher wheels cutting across the tile. Leah's wrist slipped from mine as they turned the corner. Andre's face folded, the kind of grief men practice in mirrors. The cellar. He blinked fast, shaking his head. I was out getting groceries. She must have. He didn't finish, and I didn't fill in the silence for him. The house still smelled like bleach. I followed the stretcher outside, the night pressing close. Our porch light hummed against the siren glow. A few neighbors stood by their mailboxes, pretending not to stare. Leah's bare feet peeked from under the blanket, small, gray, still trembling. Which hospital? I asked the medic. County General. I climbed into my car before Andre could offer to drive. My hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to feel my pulse throb through it. As the ambulance pulled ahead, a sound caught in my throat, half sob, half growl, but I swallowed it whole. The drive blurred. I remember stoplights bleeding together and the dashboard clock blinking 9:47, the same hour my mother's voice once broke through a phone line in Houston. Promise me you'll protect what's left of the family, Martha. She said it like a benediction and a burden all at once. I said I would, not knowing what I was swearing to. By the time I reached the hospital, Leah was already in a white room with too much light. Machines whispered around her, steady and sterile. A nurse asked me to wait outside, said they were stabilizing her. I nodded, eyes fixed on the small scratches lining her wrists. Each one told me something I hadn't wanted to believe. Andre arrived minutes later, carrying the same mask he'd worn at home. He took a seat across the hallway from me, phone in hand, thumb scrolling like he couldn't stop moving. Not once did he ask to see her. When the nurse passed by, he looked up just long enough to ask, "Do you know how long she's been unconscious?" His tone was polite, professional, like he was collecting information, not offering concern. I stood and walked to the doorway, ignoring the nurse's warning that the sedation would take a while. Leah's face looked peaceful now, but I could see the fight still trapped behind her eyelids. I touched her hand gently, my palm trembling against the back of hers. Her lips moved. At first, I thought it was air escaping the mask. Then I leaned closer and caught it, one faint syllable cutting through the hum of the machines. Papers. Just that. One word, fragile as dust, but sharp enough to slice through the room. I looked back over my shoulder. Andre was still scrolling, head bowed, the glow of his phone painting his face cold. And that's when the air changed. Everything living inside me went quiet enough to hear what silence really sounds like, truth taking its first breath. By morning, the hospital had settled into that rhythm only grief can hear. the low shuffle of shoes, the whisper of wheels, the click of clipboards. Leah lay still under a clean blanket, the bruise along her jaw fading from purple to yellow. I sat by her bed, tracing the edge of her wristband, reading her name over and over like a prayer I didn't trust myself to finish. A knock came, soft but official. A woman stepped in, smiling the way people do when their job makes them pretend they haven't seen worse. Mrs. Ellison? Her badge read Social Services, County General. I just needed to confirm a few details for your daughter's insurance. I nodded, expecting forms or consent slips. Instead, she flipped through her folder and frowned. We got a call earlier from someone claiming to be her sister-in-law. Said she wanted to verify the billing address and policy number before we processed anything. We told her we could only release that information to next of kin. I felt my chest stiffen. Leah doesn't have a sister-in-law. The woman hesitated, glancing back toward the door. I figured as much. The call sounded rehearsed. She said her name was Marcy. The name sat there a moment before I answered. Thank you for letting me know. After she left, I looked at Leah. Her face gave nothing back. The machines beeped like tiny metronomes counting the beats of my anger. By noon, the smell of cafeteria coffee followed another visitor, a hospital billing clerk with a stack of papers under her arm. Mrs. Ellison, she said, setting them down. We're still missing the authorization form your son-in-law dropped off last night. He said he forgot his ID, so we couldn't process it. She gave a nervous laugh. You'd be surprised how often people do that. I didn't laugh. Can I see it? She blinked, uncertain. Oh, it's probably nothing. But, yes, give me a second. She pulled a single page from the folder, smoothing the crease across the middle. The paper was white, too new to belong in a hospital. The top section listed Leah's name, but my eyes locked on the signature line. Her handwriting was graceful, cursive loops with steady pressure, but this one wasn't. The signature slanted hard, letters uneven, like someone copying a pattern they didn't understand. Is that the insurance form? I asked, voice careful. She hesitated. That's the odd part. It's not from our system. She flipped to the header. Looks like property paperwork. He said it was for insurance coordination, but that's not our standard format. Something hot crawled up my spine. Do you mind if I take a look at the header? She handed it to me. My fingers trembled, but I kept my tone calm. You said he dropped this off last night. Yes, ma'am. Around 9. The same hour I was driving behind the ambulance. The clerk leaned in, whispering like she knew it was wrong to even say it aloud. He said his wife had already signed but wanted it processed quickly. I told him we'd need ID before filing. She smiled faintly. He left in a hurry. The hallway noise dimmed behind my ears. I ran my thumb across the top of the page. My daughter's name sat there, printed neat as a tombstone. Underneath it, faintly stamped, property transfer authorization. Before I could respond, a nurse stepped in with a fresh 4-bag and a folder clutched under her arm. Mrs. Ellison, she said gently, you left this at the admissions desk last night. I shook my head. I didn't leave anything. Oh, then it must have been dropped off by your family. It's marked for your review. She set it on the table, smiled, and left before I could stop her. The weight of it was wrong before I even opened it. Too light for hospital forms, too heavy for peace. I slid a finger under the flap, pulling it open slow. Across the top, bold and clean, the header read, "Quitclaim deed, unfiled draft." And somewhere deep in the building, a machine beeped twice and went quiet like the air itself was holding its breath. By the third day, Leah's color had changed from paper to skin again. Her eyes opened longer, followed movement, even held mine for a few breaths at a time. The doctor said her body was stabilizing. Her mind would take longer. I sat by her bedside through every beep, every sigh, every shift of light on the linoleum floor, counting her breaths like proof she was still mine. When she finally spoke, her voice was the sound of a secret scraping its way back to daylight. "Mama," she whispered, throat raw. They wanted me to sign something." I leaned closer. "Who?" Her hand twitched weakly against the blanket. "Andre. And a woman, I don't know. She said she was helping him fix the papers." "What kind of papers?" She blinked, and a tear escaped the corner of her eye. "Property. The land Daddy left." The words sliced through the air clean as a knife. The machines kept beeping like nothing had happened, but the room shrank around them. That land had been Marcus's last gift before the sickness took him. 40 acres outside Macon, quiet, wooded, tax-paid, and titled clean. After the funeral, I'd had it transferred to Leah's name, not mine. I'd told her, a woman needs something no man can touch. She'd laughed back then, said I was being dramatic, but I'd seen too many women lose everything the minute a smile turned sour. I felt that same ache now, watching her struggle to keep her eyes open. "What did they do when you refused?" Her jaw tightened, locked the door, said I needed to calm down first. She swallowed hard. "They said if I just signed, we could start over." I tried to scream. Nobody came. The nurse peeked in, saw us talking, and slipped quietly back out. I reached for Leah's hand again, felt the faint tremor still moving under her skin. "Do you remember the woman's name?" She frowned, searching the memory. Something with an M. She had a folder. She said the notary was waiting. Her eyes fluttered, exhaustion pulling her under again. "Mama, they said it's safer if it's in his name now." She didn't finish. The sedative in her foreline took her mid-sentence, pulling her back into quiet. I sat there long after she slept, staring at her hand where the 4-needle rested. The anger rising in me didn't shake. It crystallized. I thought of Marcus, the way he used to tap his pen 3 times before signing anything. I could still hear his voice. "If a man rushes you, baby, he's hiding what he stands to gain." I closed my eyes and saw the folder from yesterday. Quitclaim deed. Unfiled draft. Someone had already drawn the outline of the theft before Leah even picked up a pen. When I stepped out to the hallway, Andre was there, leaning against the vending machine, his jacket folded over one arm. His shirt was spotless, pressed too smooth for a man who claimed sleepless nights. He smiled like a salesman. "How's she doing?" "Breathing," I said. "You." He shrugged, trying to hold it together. His gaze slid toward the nurse's station, where the billing clerk was walking past. I should handle her paperwork soon. These hospitals are picky. That word, paperwork, made something twist inside me. I wanted to tear into him, right there, but instead I nodded. "You do that." When I reached the waiting area, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. "Mrs. Ellison," a woman's voice asked. "This is the county clerk's office. I wanted to confirm something about your daughter's property file." My stomach tightened. "Go on." Someone attempted to file a deed transfer in her name last week. She said, "We stopped it because the signatures didn't match our previous record. I thought you should know." The hallway lights flickered once, soft and quick. I looked through the glass toward Leah's room, her chest rising slow, steady, unaware. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, voice steady as steel. "Thank you for calling me first." When the call ended, I stood there in that sterile corridor, the hum of machines and fluorescent light blending into one thought that burned clear as daylight. Someone had tried to erase my child on paper before they finished the job in that cellar. And I wasn't about to let them file anything again. The county clerk's call had stripped the air out of my lungs, but it didn't stop me. By morning, I was already dressed, coat buttoned, purse sipped, purpose quiet. I didn't tell Andre where I was going. I just said, "I'll check on some paperwork," and watched his face flicker with something too fast to be guilt and too practiced to be innocence. The title company sat 2 blocks from the courthouse, a glass front office with fake ferns and the smell of new toner. I stepped inside, pretending calm, but my pulse was drumming against my ribs like it knew I was stepping into the lion's mouth. A young clerk greeted me with a too bright smile. "Morning, ma'am. Can I help you?" "Yes," I said softly, handing her the folder with the unfiled draft. "This was left for my daughter, Leah Andrews. I just need to verify whether any transfer connected to this address was filed recently." Her eyes scanned the header, then flicked toward the computer screen. "Give me 1 second." I waited, taking in the sterile brightness of the place, the hum of the printer, the distant click of heels from an inner hallway. Then, behind the frosted partition, a voice that didn't belong to paperwork floated through. Smooth, confident, female. "Make sure the notary is ready this time. We can't afford another holdup." My head lifted before I meant it to. The clerk returned a moment later, whispering, "We did have an appointment under this parcel number last week, but it wasn't completed. There's another one scheduled for this afternoon." "Under what name?" She leaned forward, her voice low. 2 different LLCs, same signatory, Marcy Trent. Real estate license on file. She's good, but she moves fast. Marcy Trent. The name sounded like it had practiced its own smile. A tall woman appeared in the hallway, carrying a folder tucked against her side. Silk blouse, pencil skirt, hair twisted high enough to expose the kind of earrings you wear to be noticed. But what caught my eye wasn't her outfit. It was the glint on her wrist. A black-faced men's watch, familiar as my own heartbeat. Andre's. I felt something tighten in my throat, a quiet, bitter understanding sliding into place. She wasn't just a stranger in his scheme. She was the hand that steadied it. The woman, Marcy, spotted us and paused, measuring me with polite curiosity. "Everything all right here?" she asked the clerk. "Yes, Miss Trent. Just verifying an old file." Marcy smiled, but her eyes didn't move. "Of course." She nodded to me, warm as sugar left too long in the sun. "You must be one of our neighboring owners." I smiled back, the kind that hides sharp edges. "Something like that." She left with her heels clicking a rhythm I'd already memorized. I watched her reflection fade through the glass door and forced my breathing to slow. The clerk turned the monitor slightly. "Looks like she's rebooking under a new LLC. She's efficient, but that's not typical unless someone's trying to fast-track closing without a waiting period." "What's the new company called?" The clerk glanced around, then whispered, AM Holdings. Same initials as the last one, Andrews Management. The letters burned. My daughter's married name was being turned into a business brand for her own theft. Before I could steady my voice, Marcy's email notification blinked onto the clerk's screen. She'd left her inbox open when she walked out. I didn't move closer, but my eyes caught one line before it disappeared into the auto-refresh. Subject: refile deed once she signs clean. Those 7 words carved a hollow under my ribs. I stepped back slowly, thanking the clerk for her time. My voice sounded polite, almost casual, but my hands trembled as I tucked the folder under my arm. Outside, the sunlight felt fake, thin, manufactured, like the world didn't know what it had just shown me. I looked down the street where Marcy's car disappeared into traffic, that watch glinting one last time through the windshield. I told myself to breathe, but the air didn't taste the same anymore. Some people wear your trust like jewelry. They shine in it until it belongs to them. And now, I knew exactly who was holding the clasp. The trick to catching a liar isn't confrontation. It's conversation. You let them talk, let them feel the quiet between your sentences. By the time they realize they've said too much, you've already gathered what you came for. That's how I found myself sitting across from Marcy Trent at a small cafe downtown, sunlight cutting soft lines across the table. I'd called that morning, pretending to be interested in selling a piece of inherited land. Her voice had warmed instantly, smooth, professional, eager. I can squeeze you in before lunch, she'd said. Now she sat across from me in a cream blouse and diamond studs, her smile sharp enough to slice the silence. You said you've got acreage outside Macon? Yes, I answered. It's been in my family for years. I thought about transferring it to my daughter, but I've heard horror stories about paperwork. Her eyes flicked up, amused. That depends on who handles it. The waitress poured coffee between us. Marcy stirred hers with a slow precision, nails immaculate, hand steady. The smell of roasted beans and sugar filled the space between us. I watched her every move, not out of awe, but out of study. This was the woman who thought she could rewrite my child's life on paper. I usually work with family deeds, she continued. Married couples' inheritance transfers, estate simplifications. She smiled like she was telling me a secret. Sometimes those things get complicated after a spouse passes, or when one's under stress. Stress, I repeated. Yes, I imagine basements can be stressful. She froze mid-stir, the spoon clinking once against the cup. Her gaze darted up, searching my face for meaning. Excuse me? I gave a polite laugh, lifting my cup. Oh, I just meant repairs. Flooding, mold. Old houses are full of surprises. Her smile returned, thinner this time. Right, of course. She took a sip, but the edge around her mouth didn't ease. The waiter came back with a napkin and bumped the table slightly, spilling 2 brown drops of coffee near her phone. I'm so sorry, ma'am, he muttered. It's fine, she said quickly, dabbing it away. But when she lifted the phone, the screen lit up with a text preview, Andre's name in bold. Under it, half a message still visible before she locked it. Registrar flagged again. The words hit me like static under my skin. I kept my expression calm, my voice mild. You said you work mostly in the Macon area? Yes, that region keeps me busy. She tucked the phone face down, forcing a smile. The market's wild this season. People panic and make mistakes. Mistakes, I echoed, watching the steam curl from her cup. You ever meet clients who regret what they signed? Her jaw tightened. All the time. That's why we always advise doing things properly. Getting clean signatures. Clean. The same word from the email subject line I'd seen on her screen at the title company. I nodded like a woman hearing advice for the first time. You sound careful. That's rare. I have to be, she said, leaning back. My partner gets anxious about loose ends. He's been tense since she caught herself pausing mid-sentence. Since the recent audit. My head tilted. Audit. A bead of sweat rolled from her temple down to the curve of her cheek. She forced a laugh. Oh, nothing serious. Just office stuff. But the word she'd almost said was an audit. The syllables had started with A-B, basement. The silence thickened. I glanced down, pretending to check my watch, while my phone, tucked on the seat beside me, recorded everything. Her tone, the slip, the text, the sound of her spoon clinking one last time before she realized she'd said too much. I stood smoothing my coat. Thank you for meeting me, Miss Trent. You've been helpful. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. You'll call if you decide to sell? Oh, you'll hear from me. Outside, the cool air hit my chest like clarity. I pressed stop on the recorder. My hands shook so hard the phone almost slipped, but I caught it, steadying my breath. Behind me, inside that cafe, she was probably still replaying what she'd said, wondering if I'd noticed. I had. Every word, every tremor, every syllable of guilt pretending to sound casual. And the part that made my pulse quicken wasn't what she said. It was the way she'd started to say basement. That word was no longer a rumor. It was evidence, and my phone had captured its echo. The house felt colder than it should have when I walked back in that afternoon. Not empty, just changed, like the walls had learned how to keep secrets. I set my bag down by the table and turned on the lamp, though the daylight outside was still strong. I didn't want shadows right then. I wanted truth in plain sight. The hum of the printer caught me off guard. It wasn't loud, just steady, faint like a heartbeat behind a door. It came from Andre's small home office down the hall. The door stood half open, light bleeding from beneath. When I stepped closer, the smell of hot toner and stale paper filled my nose. The printer sat blinking red. The paper jam, light flashing. A sheet was wedged halfway out of the tray, words frozen mid-sentence. I tugged it free, my fingers brushing ink that hadn't dried. The page wasn't blank enough to ignore. It wasn't office memos or bills. The top margin read quitclaim deed, property transfer. The same line I'd seen before, only this time, the name typed clean across the grantor field made my stomach turn. Leah M. Andrews. Her name on his printer. I scanned the rest. The second page lay crumpled in the recycling bin beneath the desk. Another page beside it bore half a header, lines cut off where the machine misfed. Whoever printed this had tried more than once. I turned the sheet toward the lamp. The grantee line was blank, waiting for a name that hadn't yet been filled in. My pulse thudded behind my ears. I lowered myself into the chair, the fabric still warm from use. On the desk sat a notary envelope, unopened, cream-colored, stamped official, return required. The addressee, Mr. Andre Andrews. No postage. It hadn't been mailed. It had been hand-delivered. I turned the envelope over in my hands. The seal was intact, but the weight told its story, paper inside, thin and deliberate. Not hospital forms. Not business receipts. More like preparation. Another attempt waiting its turn. The sound of tires outside made me glance toward the window. Andre's car wasn't in the drive yet. I had time. I slipped the envelope under the stack of mail by the door and straightened the room. My fingers trembled just enough that I nearly knocked over the small photo of Leah and him from last Thanksgiving. Her smile in that picture looked unknowing, like she hadn't yet learned that love could come with fine print. As I turned to leave, the printer whirred again. It was empty, no paper left. The machine was just trying to finish what it had started. I pulled the power cord from the wall, the sound dying mid-grind. For a long minute, I stood there staring at the black screen, breathing the leftover warmth. Then my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Voicemail. Unknown number. I pressed play, holding it close to my ear. The voice on the other end was familiar. The county clerk, careful but uneasy. Mrs. Ellison, it's me again. Please call me back. This signature thing is getting odd. I'd rather explain it directly. The message ended with a click, but the echo of her tone stayed in the room long after. I slid the half-printed deed into my purse, shut the door to the office, and leaned against it for a second before my knees gave a little. The hum of the unplugged printer seemed to linger anyway, phantom and low, like the sound of something that refused to stop even when you cut the power. Something in this house was still printing lies, one sheet at a time. The county office smelled like paper dust, and coffee left too long on a warmer. Rows of metal cabinets lined the back wall, each drawer labeled in careful handwriting. It was the kind of place where memories were stored in triplicate. I kept my purse close as I stepped to the counter, folder pressed tight to my chest. The woman behind the glass couldn't have been older than 30. Her badge read R. Jameson, Registrar. She smiled politely, eyes tired but kind. Can I help you, ma'am? I got a call about a signature issue. I said, for my daughter's property file. She nodded, typing something quick into her computer. Right. Leah Andrews. We put a hold on her deed request last week. I'm the one who flagged it. Her words slowed my breathing. You flagged it? Yes, ma'am. It came through the e-recording portal. Looked clean at first. Then I noticed the signature. Something about it just didn't sit right. She turned the screen slightly toward me. There it was, the same property number, the same description Marcus had written on the original deed years ago, 40 acres, Pine Hollow Road. But the new signature, it was all wrong. The letters stood upright, blocky, uneven. No curve, no flow. She always signed me cursive. The clerk said softly, half smiling, I remember her. Came here once with her father when he finalized the title. She was just a kid, maybe 14. He was proud, said he wanted her to understand what ownership meant. The memory hit, so clean I had to grip the counter. He made her sign her initials on the corner of the record. I whispered. The clerk nodded. She did. That's how I knew this one wasn't real. Whoever sent it typed her name and scanned a fake signature on top. Our system didn't catch it, but she lowered her voice. I did. I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't a whistleblower or a hero, just a woman who trusted her gut. That quiet human instinct had stopped my daughter's erasure. What happens to it now? I asked. She shrugged, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. We hold it until we verify the source. I emailed the filer twice. No response. But I did notice something in the metadata. File uploaded from an LLC account, not an individual. An LLC? She pulled a printed copy from the drawer and placed it on the counter. Here, AM Holdings, signed by a managing member. M. Trent. The name gleamed faintly under the fluorescent light, typed clean in black ink. My fingers hovered above it like touching it might set something off. The clerk went on, almost apologetic. Most people don't realize we can see the upload trail. Same user tried again this morning, different spelling on the company name. Same contact email. I held both. Figured better safe than sorry. I forced a steady breath. You were right to hold them. She leaned closer, lowering her voice even more. If anyone asks, you didn't hear that from me. My supervisor doesn't like us using intuition on filings. I smiled faintly. Sometimes intuition's all that stands between right and ruin. She smiled back. My grandma used to say the same thing. As she turned to retrieve a file stamp, I let my eyes fall on the corner of her desk. A pile of outgoing correspondence sat waiting for pickup. The top document bore the faint outline of a scanned signature block, authorized by AM Trent, AM Holdings. Next to it, a sticky note read simply, "Refile once cleared." I thanked her for her time, gathered my folder, and started toward the exit. My hands were calm, but the space inside my chest wasn't. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped into the sunlight. The world outside looked ordinary, cars, noise, heat, but my skin prickled with something colder. My phone buzzed just as I reached the parking lot. Unknown number again. I hesitated before answering, then decided to let it ring. The voicemail tone followed. One beep, then silence, then a click like someone listening instead of speaking. When I checked the call log, the area code matched the title company's. I looked back at the building, its glass doors catching the light like mirrors hiding eyes. Somewhere inside those records, my daughter's name had been stolen and rewritten, and now the thief had realized I'd come looking. Night had swallowed the house in silence, so thick it felt staged. I'd left the lights off on purpose. Darkness tells the truth faster than daylight ever will. The clock over the stove ticked low, and even the kind of sound that keeps count of lies. Andre's footsteps came first, slow, deliberate, circling the kitchen. Then his voice, muffled at first, then rising just enough for me to hear. "No, she hasn't said a word about the forms," he murmured, pacing near the sink. "I told you, she's too busy playing nurse." I froze at the corner between the hall and kitchen doorway. The floor was cool under my bare feet. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of his shoes against tile. There was a pause, the faint click of a speakerphone. Then a woman's voice spilled through, calm, smooth, rehearsed. "Marcy. She'll sign eventually," Marcy said. "She's fragile now. Use that." Andre exhaled. "I'm trying, but Martha's getting suspicious." The clerk called her about the file. Then delay, Marcy snapped softly. "Say you're overwhelmed. Distract her. Just keep Leah calm enough to finish the paperwork. Once we get the notarized signature, I'll handle the filing myself. You'll get your half." My breath caught. The world narrowed to the space between their words. The refrigerator's hum drowned out everything else, steady as a pulse. Andre laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Half. I've risked more than that." "You'll get what we agreed." She replied. "No signature. no payout. And don't forget, she told the hospital she wanted to fix the deed. That's our cover. My hands clenched around the doorframe until my knuckles hurt. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until the sound of Leah shifting upstairs broke through the stillness. She was awake, listening. I imagined her lying there, hearing the proof she'd been right all along, that the man who promised to protect her had rehearsed her ruin. I wanted to shield her from the sound, but the truth needed to burn its way in. Andre's voice dropped lower. She'll be out of the hospital by Friday. I'll tell her the notary's routine. We'll say it's to update insurance. Good, Marcy said. And make sure you print clean copies this time. That last batch looked sloppy. He groaned. Printer jammed. Marcy laughed faintly. Of course it did. You're not careful when you're nervous. A soft beep interrupted them, someone else trying to call. He muttered, "Hold on," fumbling with the phone. For a second, the sound shifted, and her voice came through sharper, louder. "If she doesn't sign, we wait till she's calmer. You'll get your half." The line crackled. The speaker caught every syllable. I stepped forward. The chair near the table scraped against tile when my knee brushed it, the noise slicing through the conversation. Andre whipped around, startled. "Martha," I stood there in the half-light, my shadow stretching long across the floor. "You left it on speaker," I said quietly. "I heard enough." His hand flew to the phone, fumbling to end the call, but Marcy's voice was still faint on the line, asking, "What happened?" "Andre." He stared at me, mouth open but words gone. The color drained from his face, and for the first time since all this began, I saw the truth under his performance. Fear. Not of exposure, but of the calm I carried. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just looked at him the way I once looked at storms through the window, steady, waiting for the lightning to choose where it would strike. "You need to leave that phone right where it is," I said, my voice low, steady. "And you're going to sit down." He didn't move. The silence that followed was louder than his lies had ever been. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Leah had heard it too. Her world, like mine, would never sound the same again. Silence has a shape. It fills corners, slips under doors, watches everything. That morning, it sat between Andre and me at the kitchen table like a third person who knew the truth. He tried to speak once, something about coffee, about normalcy, but I let the quiet answer for me. It did a better job. I'd learned something overnight. Anger feeds liars. Silence starves them. When he left for work, I started moving through the house like I was cleaning, but every motion had purpose. I opened drawers, checked folders, photograph papers. His desk held 3 envelopes marked insurance, but the inside pages were property forms. The printer tray still smelled of heat. Half a test page curled, like it was ashamed of what it printed. I made copies of everything, every deed, ID, marriage license, anything that could serve as armor. The folder grew thicker by the hour, its edges biting my palms. It wasn't vengeance I was collecting. It was survival. Leah's voice came faintly from the living room, where she was on the phone with her therapist. She'd been attending sessions twice a week since coming home. I stayed quiet, listening without intruding. "I still hear things sometimes," she told the therapist. "I keep thinking I imagined it all." A pause, then the therapist's voice, warm, measured. "When the mind doubts itself, paper helps. Write it down. Document every memory you're sure of. It gives you power back. Leah sniffed softly. You mean like a journal? Not just that. Paper proves truth. Even silence written down has a voice. I stood there behind the wall, letting those words settle into me. Paper proves truth. Silence has a voice. By afternoon, I had filled a file box with copies. Leah's birth certificate, Marcus's death certificate, their marriage license, property deeds, bank statements. Each page felt heavier than its weight. I labeled them carefully, before Andre and after Andre. The difference between the two piles was like day and night, the first neat and clean, the second smudged with edits, initials that didn't match, dates rearranged like someone tried to rewrite time. Andre came home just before sunset, humming under his breath, carrying groceries like peace offerings. He called from the doorway. I picked up Leah's favorite soup. I didn't answer. I sat at the table, hands folded on a small envelope sealed in gold tape. When he finally stepped into the kitchen, he saw the file box open beside me. His smile faltered. What's all that? Records, I said evenly. Copies of everything in this house that has a name or a number attached to it. He laughed uneasy. You planning a history exhibit? I met his eyes. I'm planning clarity. He looked at the envelope, then at me. What's that? I pushed it toward him. From the county registrar. He hesitated. You open it? No need. It's addressed to both of us. He picked it up, thumbs grazing the seal, but not daring to break it. His throat moved when he swallowed. What does it say? I already told you. I said softly. They want to see us next week. He blinked, pretending confusion. About what? I smiled without warmth. About signatures. The room went still. Even the fridge seemed to hush itself. He stared at me, trying to read how much I knew. I gave him nothing. That was the power of silence. It left him to fight ghosts he couldn't see. He set the envelope down slowly, backing toward the hallway. You're making something out of nothing, he muttered. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The quiet around us had become sharp enough to draw blood. When he finally left the room, I sat there a moment longer, listening to his footsteps retreat, the click of the bedroom door shutting. Then I looked at the envelope again, the one thing on that table not copied, not cataloged. It wasn't paper this time that held the truth. It was silence, and it was finally working for me. The registrar's office was colder than I remembered, the kind of air that carries truth, whether you want it or not. The room smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner, but underneath it was something else, anticipation. Andre sat beside me, tie straight, jaw tight, pretending calm. Across the desk, the young clerk I'd met before, Miss Jameson, had already laid out 2 folders. Their corners were aligned too neatly, like she'd been rehearsing this moment. Thank you both for coming, she began. Her voice was courteous but not soft. We wanted to clear up the confusion before any permanent filings go through. I nodded once. Andre gave a small smile. Of course, just a misunderstanding. The clerk opened the first folder. This, she said, is the original deed transfer from Mr. Marcus Ellison to his daughter, Mrs. Leah Andrews. Recorded clean, notarized properly, no amendments. She slid it closer to us. The paper looked old, faintly yellowed, the ink still rich and unbroken. Then she opened the second. The difference was immediate. The font heavier, the spacing off, the signature stiff, mechanical. This one, she said, was submitted electronically last week under an LLC called AM Holdings. Same parcel, same transfer line, but an entirely new grantee field, Andre Andrews. Andre's smile faltered. His hand twitched toward the folder, but stopped short. I don't understand, he said lightly. That's not mine. Someone must have used my name. The clerk didn't argue. She simply reached to the side of her desk and lifted a printed log sheet. According to the e-record system, the upload originated from this address. She turned the page so we both could see andre.andrews@amholdings-realtors.com. His hand trembled when he reached for his glass of water. That can't be right. Before he could finish, the door opened behind us. The notary entered, a woman in her 50s with gray curls pinned back and a steady walk that told you she'd seen worse than this. Her badge read Evelyn Cross, Notary Public. Sorry for the interruption, she said to the clerk, then looked at us. You wanted me to confirm my statement. The clerk nodded. Please. Evelyn opened her notebook, reading from a page without looking up. On the evening of February 3rd, Mr. Andrews contacted me requesting a mobile notarization for a deed transfer. He said his wife couldn't be present due to illness. I informed him that all parties must appear and provide identification. He became impatient. She closed the book, meeting his eyes. I refused the service. Andre's face colored, a red creeping up from his collar. That's ridiculous. You called me twice, she interrupted quietly. Same night, same request. I keep a log for reasons exactly like this. Silence rippled through the room. The clerk slid both deeds side by side, edges touching like a before and after of morality. Mr. Andrews, she said softly, you can look them over if you'd like. You'll notice the differences. He didn't move. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the pause, joined by the faint ticking of the wall clock. I watched the way his shoulders sank just slightly as though gravity had finally remembered his name. Ms. Jameson turned another page on her screen, then spoke again, quieter this time, but with precision. One more thing, she said. When a digital submission is made through our portal, it requires a verified email address and confirmation code. Each upload logs to that account automatically. She stopped, looking straight at him. Mr. Andrews, both attempts, last week and this morning, were logged under your address. The room went still. Andre's hand flattened against the table. His mouth opened like he might argue, but no sound followed. Even the clerk didn't press. The truth didn't need help standing. I sat back, my pulse steady, my silence doing the work my words never could. For the first time since this began, Andre wasn't performing. He was just sitting there, caught between the two files, the man he pretended to be, and the one the papers proved he was. The clerk closed the folder gently, aligning the corners once more. We'll be in touch, she said. But she didn't have to be. The damage was already filed. The call came the next morning. A low professional voice from the title company requested my presence to verify statements related to an internal audit. I didn't need translation. It meant the walls were closing in. When I arrived, the building looked different. Same glass doors, same fake plants, but the air inside carried a chill. The receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes. Someone had already started whispering. I followed a young associate down the hall to a small conference room with blinds half drawn. Through the narrow slits, I saw Marcy Trent sitting at the table, fingers laced too tightly, a stack of papers waiting in front of her. She looked smaller than before, stripped of polish. No diamond studs, no silk blouse, just a gray jacket and eyes that had lost their shine. Across from her sat 2 compliance officers and the branch manager. Their tone wasn't angry. It was clinical. "Miss Trent," the manager said evenly, "we've received a report from the county registrar regarding multiple deed submissions under one parcel number. We also found that the documents were processed through your corporate login." Marcy's hand twitched. "That must be a system error," she said quickly. "I handle dozens of listings." The woman beside her cut her off. "This isn't a listing. It's a private transfer. No open file, no commission record. We checked your access log." The manager slid 2 papers across the table. I recognized them instantly. One real, one forged. The contrast screamed louder than any accusation could. "Can you explain why the metadata from both uploads traces back to your workstation?" Marcy's lips parted, but no sound came. She reached for a pen, fidgeted, then set it down again. The room hummed with tension. The younger compliance officer leaned in, voice calm but sharp. "We also recovered email correspondence with a Mr. Andre Andrews. You discussed notarization, filing deadlines, and payout percentages. Would you like to confirm that was business related?" Marcy's pupils flinched. "It was supposed to be a side deal," she murmured. "He said his wife knew." The manager's tone dropped. "Does she?" The question landed like a gavel. Marcy's eyes flicked toward me for the first time, realizing I was there, silent, watching. Color drained from her face. For a second, her composure cracked. She looked like a woman meeting the truth she'd built a life around avoiding. "You can step out, Mrs. Ellison," the manager said gently. "We'll need her full statement." But I didn't move. I kept my hands folded, expression calm, the same way I'd learned to breathe through grief and betrayal. I wanted her to feel what Leah had felt, helpless, cornered, seen. Outside the glass, I could hear the whisper of staff gathered near the printer area. They weren't pretending anymore. Words drifted. She used company forms, private deal. Andre's name all over it. The kind of whispers that stain reputations permanently. Marcy tried to salvage dignity. "It was supposed to be simple," she said softly. "He told me it was legal. He said she'd never find out." The manager didn't raise her voice. "And you believed him?" Marcy swallowed hard. "I thought." "Don't." The manager cut in. "You didn't think. You executed. And now you've dragged this office into a fraud investigation." A tremor passed through her shoulders. Her hand shook as she reached for the pen again. "What do you need from me?" "A written statement," the manager said. "Everything you did, who authorized it, and when. Leave nothing out." Marcy nodded, pulling the paper closer. Her handwriting, once looping and confident, now stuttered across the page. I stood behind the glass, watching the ink dry like confession bleeding into paper. When she finished, she slid it forward, her voice barely audible. "He said his wife would never know." The manager took the page without a word. Outside, the wind pressed against the glass panes of the office, low and steady. Inside, the silence wrapped itself around us. No one dared move, as if breaking it would shatter whatever was left of her control. That's when I realized she wasn't afraid of losing her job. She was afraid of me, and fear, I'd learned, speaks louder than guilt ever could. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnish and rain. Every sound seemed measured. The shuffle of papers, the creak of benches, the soft clearing of throats. But beneath it all was something heavier, like the whole room had agreed not to breathe too loudly. Andre sat at the defense table, navy suit press sharp enough to cut. His jaw worked in small, restless motions. Beside him, Marcy Trent kept her eyes down, hands clasped tight, a pale shadow of the woman who once smiled over coffee. Across from them sat Leah, my daughter. Thin, steady, the tremor in her fingers the only proof of how much she'd fought to stand there. The charges were read slowly, the words sounding foreign even as they belonged to us. Attempted property fraud, false imprisonment, coercion. Every syllable carried weight. I watched Andre's face as the clerk recited each one. He didn't flinch, not at first. But when the prosecutor repeated false imprisonment, his fingers twitched on the table, thumb scraping the edge of his wedding band until it slipped halfway off. Leah took the stand first. Her voice came out quiet, nearly trembling. The court reporter leaned closer to catch it all. He said it was just paperwork. She whispered. He told me if I signed, things would get better. When I refused, he locked the door. A ripple went through the room. Even the ceiling fans seemed to hesitate. She paused, breathing through her nose, the air shaking out of her, like courage finally exhaled. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but the key was gone. The window too high. Her gaze found me then, just for a heartbeat, before returning to the judge. I screamed until my throat bled. The prosecutor nodded gently, letting silence hold the rest. Next came Miss Jameson, the registrar clerk, with her calm, careful tone. She laid out the evidence with precision. Timestamps, mismatched signatures, repeated uploads. It wasn't the system that caught it, she said simply. It was my memory. I remembered how Leah Ellison's father taught her to sign. Then Evelyn Cross, the notary, followed. She didn't raise her voice once. I refused to notarize without both parties present, she said. He insisted, but I follow the law. My refusal was recorded at 8:47 p.m., same evening as the fraudulent submission. Ordinary women, telling extraordinary truths. The kind of power that doesn't roar, it just refuses to lie. Marcy took the stand after them, shoulders bowed. Her lawyer's voice guided her gently, but her answers fell like stones. He said it was harmless. She murmured. He said his wife would never know. Andre's stare cut toward her, sharp and warning. She didn't look back. When it was the prosecution's turn to play the audio, the bailiff adjusted the small speaker on the table. The static crackled, filling every inch of silence until it hurt. First came Marcy's voice from the cafe, light, almost careless. He's been tense since the basement thing. Then Andre's, deeper, controlled. If she doesn't sign, we'll wait till she's calmer. And finally, the one that dropped the entire room into stillness. Lock the door till she signs. No one moved, not even the judge. The recording ended with the faint sound of his breath, a calm exhale before the silence swallowed it whole. Andre's face drained of color. He turned toward me then, eyes darting, desperate for disbelief. I gave him none. Leah's hand found mine under the rail, separating the gallery from the floor. Her palm was cool, but steady. We didn't squeeze. We didn't need to. The words had already done what years of pain couldn't. They'd spoken for us. The judge leaned forward slightly, pen motionless between his fingers. "We'll reconvene for sentencing next week," he said. His voice didn't echo. It just landed solid and final. The gavel struck once, and for a moment it sounded like mercy. The courtroom was full, but no one spoke above a whisper. The hum of cameras and the shuffle of feet filled the quiet like nervous static. I sat beside Leah, her hand resting loosely in mine, both of us waiting for the last chapter to finish writing itself. Andre stood before the bench in a dark suit that fit him too well for a man facing conviction. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't nod. He just stared forward, hollow and pale, as the judge adjusted his glasses and read from the verdict sheet. On the charges of attempted property fraud, false imprisonment, and coercion, he paused, scanning the paper. The court finds the defendant, Andre Andrews, guilty on all counts. The words didn't echo. They landed clean and heavy like stones in water. Marcy Trent, seated at the defense table beside her attorney, let out a shuddering breath. Her plea agreement had been filed earlier that morning, guilty in exchange for cooperation. Her face looked washed out, drained of the person she tried to pretend she was. The judge continued, voice steady. Sentencing, 25 years state confinement for Mr. Andrews. 15 years for Miss Trent, suspended after 10, with full restitution. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Leah squeezed my hand, her body shaking, not from fear this time, but release. The judge turned to us. The property deed known as Parcel 40, Pine Hollow Road, is hereby restored to its rightful owner, Mrs. Leah Andrews, with a permanent title freeze until further court order. No further transfers, power of attorney, or proxies shall be honored. Ever. Leah's breath caught. That land, her father's promise, was safe again. Then the judge looked at me. For a moment, he didn't speak. His eyes softened. Mrs. Ellison, your composure throughout these proceedings has been an example of remarkable restraint. The court recognizes that your silence and diligence preserved not only this case, but your daughter's rights. I nodded once, unable to trust my voice. The clerk wrote something in the record, the sound of the pen scratching like punctuation to the moment. Andre's lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder. Would you like to make a statement? Andre shook his head, eyes still locked on the floor. I wondered if he saw the cellar when he blinked. Maybe he did. Maybe that's why his hands never stopped trembling. Marcy leaned forward, whispering something to her attorney before standing. Your Honor, she said, her voice thin, I want to apologize to Mrs. Ellison and her daughter. I was wrong. The judge didn't reply. He simply nodded toward the bailiff. You may be remanded. The clank of the cuffs echoed softer than expected, but it was the first real sound of justice I'd ever heard. Leah leaned against me, eyes glistening. It's over, she whispered. Almost, I said. When the hearing adjourned, the crowd drifted outside into the sharp afternoon light. Reporters had already gathered on the steps, microphones raised, voices overlapping. Mrs. Ellison, how do you feel? Do you think justice was served? Leah hesitated beside me, but I steadied her hand. We moved slowly down the stairs, each step deliberate. The flash of cameras hit my face, but I didn't flinch. I turned toward them, calm and clear. Some signatures, I said quietly, should never be forced. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then the murmurs began again, soft, rippling through the crowd like wind through tall grass. I guided Leah toward the car, waiting by the curb. Behind us, the courthouse stood tall, glass-catching sunlight, reflecting a day that finally belonged to truth. The same silence that once filled my house now followed me, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. And sometimes justice doesn't need noise. It just needs proof and patience enough to let the guilty hear themselves fall. Spring came quiet that year. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings, the kind that don't announce themselves. They just start to heal what winter left behind. Leah spent her mornings in the backyard, now, hands deep in soil, humming under her breath. The old cellar window, once clouded with dirt and fear, gleamed clear and open. New locks had been installed, solid, bright brass that caught the sun. When the wind blew through, it didn't sound trapped anymore. It sounded free. I watched from the porch, coffee cooling in my hand. She knelt beside the flower bed she'd built herself, planting marigolds around the frame of that window. Each bloom looked like a small sun reclaiming the dark. Her hair was longer now, her shoulders straighter. The scars were still there, but they'd settled into her like soft punctuation, proof that a story could end differently than it began. Inside, the house had changed too. The hum of machines was gone, replaced by the slow rhythm of living. Footsteps, laughter, sometimes silence that didn't hurt anymore. Even the cellar door, once sealed with dread, stood freshly painted and open, light pooling down the steps like grace. The land outside of town had changed the most. The property Andre and Marcy tried to steal no longer sat idle or forgotten. Leah had decided to do something her father would have loved. She called it the Marcus Learning Garden, a community plot where local children came to learn how to plant, grow, and share. The first time I saw the new sign, white lettering against cedar wood, I felt something in my chest unclench. People donated seeds, tools, time. On weekends, the laughter of children drifted across the fields. What they didn't know, and didn't need to, was that the soil beneath their feet had once been the centerpiece of a crime. Now it grew tomatoes, sunflowers, forgiveness. One afternoon, Leah called me down to the yard. "Look," she said, pointing at the cellar window. The morning light had shifted, pouring through the glass in a golden streak that cut across the dirt floor inside. Dust particles danced in it like tiny ghosts learning how to breathe again. I stood beside her, letting the warmth reach us both. "It looks different now," I said. "It feels different," she whispered, "like it's not keeping anything in anymore." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she smiled through it. I slipped my arm around her shoulders. "That's because it's not," I said. We stood there for a long time, saying nothing else. There was no need. The house, the land, even the air had learned the language of peace. Later, when the sun climbed higher, I walked back to the porch. A breeze pushed through the trees, scattering petals across the steps. The world looked ordinary again, but that's what miracles often do. They hide in normal days in repaired doors, in light that finds its way into old wounds. Leah stayed by the window, fingers tracing the glass, watching her reflection blur in the brightness. I knew what she was thinking about what was taken, what was returned, and what was rebuilt quietly between the two. From where I stood, I could see both her and the garden beyond, sunlight catching every new leaf, every promise kept. The cellar no longer belonged to silence. It belonged to mercy. And mercy, I've learned glows best where the dark once tried to live.